So let's see, should we believe this causation argument for physicalism? Does it give us a persuasive reason to accept physicalism about the mind? Let's take a look. So here's the argument. Two premises: mental phenomena have physical effects. Only physical phenomena have physical effects, so mental phenomena are physical. This is valid. If both premises are true, then mental phenomena have to be physical because they have physical effects, and the only way they could do that would be if they were themselves physical. So, should we believe this? Well, premise one, mental phenomena have physical effects. It certainly seems like this is true. We feel like we make things happen all the time. We have an experience of choice. We have an experience of control over our body and how it moves. And it's also, we understand other people by other people's behavior, by thinking that their mental states are what produce their behavior. Now, that might all be mistaken, but we experience both ourselves and others as agents, as beings whose minds produce effects in their bodies and are embodied. And so we might reject this premise in the end, but it looks pretty solid. So let's turn to consider premise two, that only physical phenomena cause physical effects. This premise is more complicated in what it says, and the support for it is more complicated. So what it says is, let's say that something happens in the physical world, and that it happened for something made it happen. What this premise says is, in that situation, the thing that made it happen must itself be physical. Now, this isn't physicalism about everything. It's physicalism. It doesn't say that everything is physical. It just says all the things that have physical effects, they are themselves physical. So if you're interacting with the physical world, then you yourself are physical. Neuroscientists, brain scientists seem to believe this. You know, if you're interested in what's happening in the body, and in particular if you're interested in understanding behavior in your brain, you know, you can describe that behavior at different levels of description. You might do so in terms of just, you know, personality and using other mentalistic terminology that explicitly talks about mental states. But if you're a neuroscientist, then you're looking for physical causes. And once you find a physical cause, you're going to be satisfied. But also, you would never look outside of the physical realm. You would think, oh, we haven't found a physical cause yet. Well, there's more. We have to look further in the brain. We have to look further, maybe elsewhere in the body as well. But we need to look more. We need to be more careful in our search. And following that principle has been extremely successful. It's a big part. Following that principle has produced our understanding of the brain, which is pretty amazing. It's limited because the brain is extraordinarily complex, but it's pretty impressive. So this is a good principle that, you know, we use in science, and we're going to use it here now. You know, its use in science might be, well, it's helpful to use in science, but that doesn't mean it's always true. But the physicalist thinks it always is. Now, it's talking about causation. And so to understand why it might be true, we need to talk a little bit more about cause and effect, which is itself complex. And what we're going to need is a notion of a complete cause. So let's say a car slid off the road. You might say, well, it slid off the road because the driver was tired. But in general, tired drivers don't slide off the road, so there was probably something else going on in addition to the driver's fatigue. It might have been dark. But it's not always the case that tired drivers slide off the road when it's dark, and so probably also maybe the road was icy. And maybe there were further factors as well. So each of those was a part of the cause, and once we find out what all of the factors were together that produced the driver sliding off the road, then we would say that is the complete cause. The complete cause is the complete set of factors that together produce an effect. So basically, according to fundamental physics, every physical effect, in fact, does have a complete physical cause. So if we think about physics as talking about particles and gravity and electricity and magnetism and so on, in that science describes how particles sort of move around and the different properties they have, and that science includes laws that describe how those particles move around, how fields change, how forces change, and so on. The electron is here, so it's going to go there. There's a little bit of randomness that's built into those laws. Quantum mechanics, the science of these particles, has some very strange elements in it. But nonetheless, part of the laws is that every the way that the physical universe is down at that fundamental at any given time has a complete cause at an earlier time. There's an earlier way that the universe was that explains why it is the way it is right now at that fundamental level. The laws are very, very complete. And this is true, those laws, because they describe the fundamental level, but the behavior of any given physical object, like the mug we talked about earlier, or a plant, that just is made up of all those little subatomic particles and with the fields and the forces acting on them. And so the fundamental laws say that there's a complete cause for, in fact, everything that happens, not only at the fundamental level, the fundamental physical level, but at the everyday level as well. So if we ask, why did the plant grow? We say, oh, it was sunlight and temperature and water. But all of that can actually be described at the fundamental physical level as well. So, the point of physics initially was to explain what are the explanations of the physical observations we can make in every day. So why does the wind blow? Why is the sky blue? Why does the moon not fall to the earth? How do magnets work? And so on. And the fundamental physical laws explain not only what's happening at the fundamental level, but they explain what's happening at the sort of observable everyday level that we live our lives in. And so, in fact, what the fundamental laws of physics tells us that, in fact, yes, every physical effect does have a complete physical cause. So that's the first premise for us to believe that only physical phenomena cause physical effects, right? Remember, the ultimate conclusion of this argument is that mental phenomena are physical because, on the one hand, they cause physical effects, and only physical phenomena cause physical effects. Right now we're asking, well, why should we believe that only physical phenomena can cause physical effects? And the first thing we've just observed is that, in fact, it's quite plausible. It looks like that physics tells us that every physical effect does have a complete physical cause. If something physical happens in the world, then there's a preceding physical arrangement that produced the physical effect. So that's the first premise. And then the second premise is just that every physical effect has only one complete cause. And if those are both true, then we get this conclusion that only physical phenomena cause physical effects. The only thing that can make a change in the physical universe is something else physical. So let's think about this last claim, every effect has only one complete cause, in the context of your body. So imagine we're thinking about, or the body of the woman turning the key, so the key has turned. Why is that? Well, it's because muscles in her hands and arms flex. And why is that? Well, because it's the neurotransmitters, acetylcholine in particular, bathe the muscles and cause the muscles to, to flex and extend. And why was that neurotransmitter released? Well, because of electrical activity in the neuron, and so on, all the way back to the brain states. And at each stage of that, what we have is a complete physical cause of what happens at the next stage. And what we then would want to ask is, well, okay, so how could the mental effect, or the mental state, if it was separate from the physical events, get in there and make anything happen? And the problem is that it's hard to see what contribution a non-physical mental state could have. There's no more work to be done to make your body move, right? We already know why all the subatomic particles are moving in the ways that they would move. We know why the muscles are flexing, which means we know why the hand is turning, which means we know why the key is turning. And it's not clear, well, what further difference would the mental state make? And you might think, oh, well, maybe it would cause something to happen in the brain. But what happens in the brain is just caused by previous events in the brain, and then impacts on the brain from outside the brain, like, visual perception and things happening elsewhere in the body, and so on. And so if we ask, well, where could the mental state do its work? That we would then think, okay, the mental state is having an impact. If the mental state is non-physical, right, there's nowhere for it to intervene. Everything's already been taken care of at the physical level, and there's nothing more for the mental state to do. At least that's the idea that the physicalist who's putting forward this argument wants to put forward. So we can look at the causal argument for physicalism as working like this. On the one hand, we think that mental phenomena have physical effects. That's agency. We also think that only physical phenomena have physical effects, or at least we might. If both of those are true, then we get the conclusion that mental phenomena are physical. Should we believe that only physical phenomena have physical effects? Well, physics tells us that every physical effect has a complete physical cause, and it's fairly plausible that every physical effect has only one complete cause, because it's not clear, once there's that physical complete cause there, it's not clear how anything else could be making any difference or doing any causal work. And so if those two are true, then it's true that only physical phenomena have physical effects. So in other words, if mental phenomena have physical effects, and every physical effect has only one complete cause, and every physical effect has a complete physical cause, then mental phenomena are physical. The only way that mental phenomena could produce the physical effects that they do is by themselves being physical. Now, you might not be entirely persuaded by that argument, and that's okay. I'm not sure that I'm persuaded by that argument. I think it's a very persuasive argument, but I'm not at all certain that it's true. We can think about this situation with mental causation in a somewhat different way. So we can rearrange. Here are three claims. Mental phenomena have physical effects. That's one of the premises. Only physical phenomena have physical effects. That's it's the sub-conclusion of that previous argument. And mental phenomena aren't physical. That's the denial of the argument, of the conclusion of the argument. Right? So if we say mental phenomena aren't physical, then we're being dualist. We're saying there are two kinds of things. If we're saying mental phenomena have physical effects, we're saying we believe that we and other beings with minds are agents. And if we say only physical phenomena have physical effects, then we're thinking, yeah, this story about physics giving us complete causes and there not being any room for anything else to act, we're persuaded by that. So, the issue is that those cannot all be true. They're inconsistent with each other. At least one of them has to be false. You cannot believe all of them and believe the true. If you believe all of them, then you're one of those things. Then one of your beliefs is false. They cannot all be true at the same time. So you have to give up at least one of these. You have to say, "Oh, I was wrong. Actually, mental phenomena are physical, and I'm not a dualist." Or you have to say, "Oh, I was wrong. Mental phenomena don't have physical effects, and the experiences that we have of agency of our own and of others, those are illusions, and in fact we don't have agency." Or you have to say, no, there are things besides physical phenomena that can have physical effects, and then you have to explain how that could be. And each of those are challenging. And so one way to think about what we've seen here is, well, maybe you're not persuaded by the causation argument, but what we have here is it's not a dilemma, but a trilemma. There are these three claims that all look fairly plausible, and yet they can't be all true. And physicalism is one way out of that. It says, I'll tell you how they're not all true. Actually, mental states are physical. Maybe you find that unappealing, and indeed we'll be looking at an argument in the next module that mental states are not physical. But these three claims and their incompatibility is a core problem when we're thinking about the relationship between the mind and the body. All of these claims are attractive and plausible, and yet they cannot all be true. And that's what we're stuck with. And one thing that you might want to think about is, well, okay, which of those claims would you like to discard? So to wrap up this module, I want to say that the causal argument for physicalism has some weight, because it's hard to see how something non-physical could affect the physical, especially given that it looks like the physical is its own autonomous domain, and it's not clear, there's no room left for anything non-physical to do any work in the physical domain. Now, if we agreed with the causal argument for physicalism, then we would want to ask, well, how could it be that the mind is physical? What does that mean? And the information processing view of the mind provides an explanation for that. We might reject the information processing view, and in fact, in the next module, when we look at arguments against physicalism, we'll be seeing in part that those arguments against physicalism reject the information processing view. And even if we're not persuaded by the causal argument for physicalism, we're still left with the causal trilemma. There are those three plausible claims that mental states have physical effects, that the only thing that can have a physical effect is itself physical, and the mental isn't physical. We cannot believe all of those, which one would you like to give up on? And so what you need to know for this module is, what is the causal argument and what is the causal trilemma? And we'll be looking at arguments against physicalism in the next module.